So I said in my previous video that I would make a video describing my story of how I came to be in an asexual platonic partnership with my husband Tim. So I'm going to make that video today. I'm on a long commute home, so I'm doing this as a voice memo, and then I'll add a picture to the video. You don't really want to see my face this whole time anyway. So here's the story of me and Tim. I met Tim through my friend Diana. I was 25 at the time. She and I were going to spend the week at an anime convention, cosplaying and doing all that kind of thing. And she said, hey, I've got this really good guy friend that I've known a long time. We're real close. He's an awesome dude. He wants to know if he can share our hotel room with us. He'll sleep on the floor. I trust him. He's cool. I said, yeah, sure. I don't mind. So he went to the festival with us. We all hung out as a group the whole time. And I really didn't think anything about it. Seemed like a nice enough dude, but, you know, I mean, there wasn't like any interest there, I think, on either one of our parts. We were just getting to know each other as friends. So shortly after this, I actually met my late husband, Peter. So I definitely was not even thinking about Tim in regards to anything like dating. So he sort of became involved in my friend group because of his connection to Diana, and we started going to, you know, these conventions together on a semi-regular basis. And I wouldn't say that we were friends per se, but we were acquaintances. He seemed like a nice enough guy. And I do remember wondering why he was single, because this went on for, from the time I met him the first time until we actually started dating, which was 2 years after Peter died. I guess we had known each other about 7.5, 8 years at that point, right? So during all that time, he never had a girlfriend. And I just couldn't figure out why. I asked Diana, and her story was that she just thought maybe he was too picky. That's all she could come up with. And that's all I could come up with, because he seemed to have good enough social skills to me. And he was attractive enough, really nice, really smart, really funny. The only thing I could think about was that, you know, there are certain women who are hung up on things like they want a man who makes a certain amount of money, and he was always sort of chronically underemployed. Also, some women are funny about not wanting to date geeky guys. So I'm like, okay, between the fact that he doesn't have a great job and he's geeky, maybe that's why he, you know, doesn't meet a lot of girls. But he seemed nice, and yeah, I enjoyed his company. So about 2 years after Peter died, we all went to a convention together. And probably for the first time, we just spent a lot of time one-on-one, right? I mean, before I hadn't, because I was a married woman. I wasn't interested in spending time one-on-one with a man. But at this particular convention, you know, I had gone through my grieving process, and I was like, okay, let's hang out, let's spend some time together. So we did. And I found out that we actually had a ton of things in common. I actually asked him why he was single, and that's when he admitted to me that he was just pathologically shy, which I wouldn't have guessed, because he actually was perfectly normal in his social skills, in my opinion. But he said that he was actually terrified of rejection from women, and that he had only had one girlfriend in his life, which had happened in his early 20s. He was in his mid-30s by this point, so he had been single for about 15 years. And he said that his one girlfriend had been the one to chase him and initiate the relationship. He just could not do that. And I would later figure out that he probably had some sort of an avoidant personality disorder, because he doesn't deal with conflict or rejection at all. So that made a little more sense then. And, you know, I was kind of starting to feel like I liked him. So we got home from the convention, and I decided to ask him out. He'd already made it clear that he would never ask a woman out, even if he liked her. So I asked him out. And I didn't hear anything for about 3 days. And by this time, Diana and Tim were roommates, actually. So I messaged Diana, and I was like, well, I guess he's not really into it, because I haven't heard anything back from him. Well, she took it upon herself to go talk to him, and she's like, hey, so you never answered Sydney when she asked you out? He said, well, I'm still trying to decide. She's like, what is there to decide? You either like the girl or you don't. He says, well, I like her. I think she's pretty, but I think there might be some sexual compatibility issues. And in retrospect, I should have taken this more seriously when Diana told me this story, but I didn't. He told her that he was worried there were compatibility issues because he knew that I had been involved in BDSM off and on over the years, and that I was kinky, and that he was not kinky and just wasn't sure how he felt about that. So I talked to Diana, and I said, I do prefer kinky guys, but it's not a deal breaker. And I also thought to myself, very stupidly, that any man who was as geeky and nerdy as he was had to secretly be kinky, right? I mean, we went to anime festivals together. We went to hentai festivals together. If you go to anime festivals, you know what hentai is. It's like really gnarly, X-rated Japanese porn that, you know, they'll have these like festival showings of this stuff, and it's not in like a creepy, dirty theater kind of way. It's just like they find the weirdest, wildest stuff they can find, and they play it, and everyone sort of laughs and hoops and hollers and throws popcorn at the screen. You know, that kind of a thing. But I thought any man who watched hentai had to be at least a little bit kinky. So maybe, you know, knowing that he was shy, maybe he just hadn't had an opportunity to explore that side of his sexuality. He told me he'd been single for 15 years. So he obviously didn't have a lot of experience with women, and, you know, maybe he just hadn't had a chance to really explore, and I would be able to bring him out of his shell. This was stupid of me, ladies, because men do not change, okay? At least not at that age, okay? If you meet a man who is like 20, maybe he hasn't figured his sexuality out, and maybe he's going to develop and change and grow some interest. By the time a man is in his mid-30s, he knows what he's into, okay? You're not going to convince him to get into something he's not already into. But whatever. I liked him. He was a nice guy. So after he figured out that I did not consider that a deal breaker, he accepted the date, and we started dating. And from the beginning, this relationship was weird. And I was, I guess, so damaged from dealing with my husband's death that I was not looking at things clearly. I was just happy to have found someone who seemed trustworthy, honest, and kind, and whose company I enjoyed. And so I really was making excuses for a lot of odd behavior. And when I say odd, it was nothing that was inherently negative. It was just odd. So our first several dates were group dates, right? We were all just hanging out as a group. He would not put his arm around me. He wouldn't try to kiss me. You know, there was just nothing flirtatious on his end. And to the point that I was starting to wonder if he liked me at all, because he was, you know, talking to me, but there was nothing flirty. So finally, after about a month, you know, I kind of made a move. I initiated some things, and he consented. When I initiated, we ended up sleeping together, which was actually fine. Like, I thought this guy would be terrible in bed. He wasn't. He was fine in bed, you know. But I will say that he didn't seem overly passionate about anything. Like, it was not one of those, I want to rip your clothes off and throw you against a wall kind of things, okay? It was fairly perfunctory, but he was technically good at what he did. You know, he made sure I got mine and, you know, did what he did. So it was okay. I didn't have any objection to it. And so we, you know, kind of hit that stage of our relationship. And over the course of several months, I definitely noticed that he never seemed to initiate sex. If I initiated, he would usually say yes. But not always. Not always. So that was in and of itself unusual to me. Most men are, you know, pretty up for sex. Now, my late husband was not always up for sex, but he had medical problems, so I had given him a pass for that. With Tim, I was like, well, this is a little weird, but he would say to me, I've been single for a very long time, and I'm not used to having a partner. You know, I've spent 15 years jerking off to porn, and, you know, I'm just having to get used to the idea that I now have a partner. And that made sense to me. That seemed reasonable. And we do this, girls. I mean, we do this all the time. We talk ourselves into this shit, right? And I definitely did. So, after, I guess we'd been together maybe a year and a half. We were spending a lot of time with each other. I was always over at his house or he was at mine. But we really still were only having sex maybe once a week at that. You know, maybe less sometimes, which seemed a little low for the early stages of a relationship. Well, his living situation ended up becoming complicated because he was living in a home owned by his father. His father stayed there. He helped take care of his father, who was elderly and sickly. And his father passed away. And when his father passed away, the house had to be sold. So he had to move out. And this was his childhood home. He had lived in this house all his life, right? So I offered to let him come move in with me because he really didn't have anywhere else to go. Like I said, he was chronically underemployed, and he could afford the bills on the house, but he really couldn't have afforded to pay rent on a house. Okay, that would have been beyond the income level that he was at. So I offered to let him come stay with me. And the next red flag was that he immediately suggested separate bedrooms. In fact, technically he suggested separate houses because I live on a farm and there is a couple of houses on the farm. There was a small older house that used to belong to my grandmother that no one was using, and he actually initially suggested that we set up separate bedrooms in separate houses. And I was not okay with this. I said, oh no, I'm not doing this. No sir, we are not going to have separate bedrooms. You're either all in or you're not. If you don't want to come live in and be a live-in boyfriend, you can find you someplace else to go. But we're not doing this separate bedroom thing. I'm not cool with that. Which is going to be really ironic later on in this story. So he conceded, he moved in. And I did figure out really early on that he did not like sleeping with another person. And we had slept with each other before. Like I said, we stayed at each other's houses, but it's different when it's on the weekend and no one else has got anything going on. Now we're with each other all the time, every day. And the wheels start coming off a little bit. And I realize that part of it is he cannot stand to be touched when he's sleeping, which I already knew, but I thought it would get better with time, because classic mistake, right? I'm thinking things will change. I just thought it was one of those things where, he just wasn't used to sleeping with somebody and he would eventually get over it. Spoiler alert, he never did. He hates to be touched in his sleep, and I think it may be related to some sort of ADHD sort of sensory issues maybe, but he didn't like it. In fact, he didn't like physical touch much at all. He wasn't one to hold hands, he wasn't one to kiss, he would not make out. Even when we had sex, it was, he would use his hands on me, and he would make sure that I, was satisfied several times by using his hands. But he would not kiss me during sex. He would not kiss my body. There was nothing where he was going to kiss my neck or kiss my breasts or kiss my tummy. He certainly was not going to go down south, okay? That was definitely off the table. He was beyond vanilla. He was very much, I will get you off with my hands, and then we will have intercourse, and that's what we're going to do. But again, he was such a nice guy in every other way that I was kind of willing to deal with that. I was settling. And don't settle, because even if everything else is good, if your sex life sucks, the relationship is going to fall apart, okay? And it did. It was the main thing that we fought about. And I noticed a trend with him where when we did fight about things, he was very toxic and narcissistic in the way he handled conflict. He was one of those people that he would deny wrongdoing, right? And by that I mean, I say, well, we're not having sex very often. And he says, yes, we are. Like, we've had sex like twice this month. And he's like, yeah, that's plenty. No, not for me, it's not. I don't feel like that's a normal sex life. Well, that's just because you're inherently, flawed and messed up, and you don't understand how to accept love when it doesn't come wrapped in kinky sex. And, you need to go to therapy and figure out why you were so sex, addicted. So he turned it on me. He made me the bad guy. There had to be something wrong with me. It wasn't that he was being lower libido than the average man. It was that I was somehow flawed because I wanted sex too much. And then he would become a victim by saying things like, well, I guess I'm just a terrible person. I guess I'm just a piece of shit. I don't know why you want to stay with me if I'm such a terrible person. That sort of toxic narcissistic behavior. And anything he did wrong, he wouldn't apologize for, right? He was one of those people that his apology was, well, I'm sorry that you feel that way. Which is not a fucking apology, guys. That's not an apology. He cannot just say, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to hurt you, and I will try not to hurt your feelings again. He just couldn't do that. And, when it came to the sex thing, he would say that he was going to work on it. He would promise it was going to get better. And of course, he also had a very good excuse to not be intimate because he had gone through a lot of crazy bullshit, right? Like, his dad had died, he lost his home, he had to move at a time when he wasn't really wanting to move, and he was deeply, deeply fucked up about that. And so I wasn't even bringing it up that much at first because I was like, hey, he's going through shit. Give the man some time to process his grief and these changes that have gone on in his life. But after we had lived together for about a year, I was like, okay, it's time, right? You've had time to process things and you're not making any progress. But I will say that we built a good life with each other aside from the sexual problems. We really didn't fight very often because the only thing we really fought about was the sex. And occasionally the fact that, he was just, I would say he was neglectful in that he didn't like to compliment me. He didn't compliment my appearance. He just wasn't verbally or physically affectionate. But that was the main thing we fought about. Other than that, we were very highly compatible people who had a great time with each other. And, you know, we've been so conditioned as women to believe that if a man doesn't beat you or cheat on you and he holds down a job, well, he's a fucking saint. That's a man you got to hold on to, because it is so hard to find a man who isn't a freaking villain. Okay? If a man is not objectively a villain, we think he's a catch. And that is so problematic. But that's exactly what I was dealing with. You know, and I let him get in my head. Maybe there was something wrong with me that I wanted sex as often as I did. Maybe I was the one who was fucked up. Maybe it was my problem and not his. But as the time went on, it became a bigger issue. And, you know, we ended up getting married, which was not a smart decision. But again, I'm like, oh, you know, we're happy. I don't want to break up, so we might as well get married. So we get married, which he needed the health insurance and stuff. So there were other reasons why we did it. We get married, and it just goes from bad to worse. You know, like, our first year of marriage was actually probably the worst year of our entire relationship. We fought so badly that year over him not being an attentive husband. And on top of that, there were some other things that popped up. He started drinking heavily that year, which made him be more difficult to deal with. He was more depressed. You know, like, it was just a really bad year, and I almost called it quits a couple of times. And he kept promising that things would get better, and he would work on it, and he would do a little better for a little while, and then he would go back to his old habits of neglecting me. And it wasn't just about the sex, guys. Let me make that clear. It was about the fact that we lived like roommates, right? So this is a man who has been alone all his life. He's never lived with a woman before. So he didn't understand the normal aspects of being a partner. Like, he would go to the grocery store and not ask if I needed anything. He would cook dinner and not offer to make me anything too. He would stop and give food and not ask if I wanted anything. Just all these little things where he just didn't act like a married man. It was like he was still living his own little life. He wouldn't go to bed at the same time as I did, even though we kept the same work schedule. Like, we were both 8 to 5 people, but he would wait till midnight to come to bed, you know. And I, of course, was going to bed at a decent hour because I wanted to get a full night's sleep. But you know, we never had a routine where we would eat dinner together or where we would go to sleep at the same time. And so there was none of those bonding or connection activities that most people have, aside from enjoying our hobbies together, which we did. We did enjoy our hobbies together. We're gamers, we love movies, we did all of that stuff together. But we didn't have nice routine relationship bonding like the average couple has. So we still lived very much separate lives. And when they say that you can be horribly lonely even when you aren't alone, that is so true. Because I felt completely alone. And as time went on, I just felt more and more depressed because I was rejected so much, both sexually and just in terms of affection. And, you know, again, cultural conditioning tells us that men want sex all the time. And if your man doesn't want to have sex with you, that is a very weird thing to have happen. And it must mean that something is wrong with you. And so I internalized that and decided that I had to be ugly and undesirable and terrible in bed and all of these other things. And I became very, very deeply depressed. So this went on for a few years, and it was really rough. And finally, I just sort of got to a point where I realized I could not live that way anymore, and I couldn't handle feeling neglected all the time. And at this point, he started to blame it on low testosterone. He's like, well, you know, maybe I've got low testosterone. I said, okay, let's go to the doctor and get that treated. So he finally goes to the doctor, which I had suggested for years, by the way. It just took him this long to agree to it. He gets his testosterone tested, and it was on the low side of normal, like just barely high enough to qualify for treatment. But he did qualify, so he did it. It did absolutely nothing. I don't know if it made him jerk off more or not, but it definitely did not make him any more interested in me. And because I know there's going to be some asshole in the comment section trying to imply that maybe I was just too ugly for him to be interested in, let me state that I am an attractive woman. I am not overweight. I am in good shape for my age. I take care of myself. I get attention from men all the time. It was not because I was a troll, okay? So, and let me say that he never implied that it was anything wrong with me. He always did take responsibility for the fact that it was not about me, that it was about him, right? Like, he would never say that I wasn't attractive enough or that I was doing something wrong that made him not want me. Like, he never, ever did that. He always said that he didn't know for sure why he was struggling, but he was struggling. Okay, so that he never blamed on me. But at this point, when the testosterone didn't work, I was like, hey, you know, something's got to give. And so we're sitting there one night, and I guess he decided that he was finally just going to get real fucking honest. And he says, you know, to tell you the truth, I've never been able to have sex with you without fantasizing about porn. You know, I can't get off without porn, usually. And so when we're together, I have a hard time getting off. I have a hard time staying hard. I have a hard time enjoying it because there's no porn. And I'm used to sex being very quick. I'm used to using my hand and using it really aggressively, you know, so your vagina doesn't feel like my fist on my penis. So I'm not getting the same amount of physical sensation. And on top of that, I just have a very hard time with my ADHD, like focusing on you. You know, it's like when I'm masturbating, I can look at something on my phone and I can change the video every few seconds to something new and interesting. But to just have to sit here and just look at this one woman the whole time, even though you're beautiful and there is nothing wrong with you, it just doesn't keep my mind interested. Like, I just can't get off that way. And I found this really, really deeply hurtful. And he said, he goes, I just honestly just don't like having sex with other people. I would rather masturbate than have sex. And that was when I did some research and I found out about the concept of people being asexual, which is not something I was familiar with. And I think a lot of people aren't. And so I brought that to him and I said, do you think that you're asexual? Where, you know, it's like asexual people can enjoy sexual climax, they can enjoy masturbation, they may even occasionally have sex with a partner, but for the most part they're just not sex focused and they don't feel sexual attraction really. And he's like, well, yeah, you know, that makes sense. He wasn't familiar with the term, but he understood it when he heard it. And he was like, you know, I think it was very hard for him also, because I think he had been struggling for many years with feeling like there was something wrong with him. Like he was somehow less of a man because he didn't have this normal male desire to have sex with women. I mean, he was heterosexual. When he looked at porn, it was porn of women, but it didn't make him want to have sex with a woman. He just wanted to masturbate. And it was a very perfunctory physical process for him. There was nothing emotional about it. And I told him after we had these conversations that I just did not think I could be happy like that. I didn't think that was a life I could live because I was not willing to be in a sexless marriage. And he said, well, aside from our sexual issues, you know, our life is happy, right? And I'm like, well, yeah, it is. He says, well, what if we just have an open marriage and you can have a boyfriend? I'm like, are you serious? And he's like, yeah, no, I'm dead serious. I've never been jealous. I've never cared if other guys flirted with you. I've told you before I don't care if other guys flirt with you. So, you know, why don't you just go find a boyfriend? I said, you're really, truly okay with that? He's like, I am so totally okay with that. It would be like someone taking a chore off my plate because I no longer have to feel that pressure to do something that I don't really want to do. And of course, if he doesn't want to do it, I don't want him to do it. I don't want to feel rapey, right? Like, pressuring someone to have sex with you when they don't want to doesn't make you feel good, right? And now that I know he actively dislikes it, I definitely don't want him to do it anymore. So he's like, yeah, you can have a boyfriend. You can have him come over. Hell, I don't care if you move him in the house. I just, you know, I don't want to lose my life. I like the life that we have together. I just don't want there to be a sexual component to that life. Or at least not on a regular basis. Like, we could have sex occasionally maybe, but I don't really want to feel pressured to have sex. And I was like, okay, we'll give this shit a try. So I went online, because normally I'm not a fan of online dating, but when you're looking for something that specific and niche, usually you're going to have to go on the internet, right? You're not going to be able to sell that to the average guy that you meet on the street. And I actually found somebody really quickly, and I was a little nervous when he asked me out. In fact, he had to ask me out twice before I said yes. And this was when I met my boyfriend, Greg. And part of why it took me a while to go out with him wasn't just because I was adjusting to being in an open marriage, but also because there was a really significant age gap. He was in his early 20s, I was in my early 40s, you know, it was a big gap. And I had to run it by some friends how they felt about that and whether it was ethical to be in that kind of relationship. And all my friends said it was. I know people on the internet don't like age gap relationships. Every single friend I talked to, especially my male friends, said, oh, hell yeah, I would love to have been banging a hot cougar when I was 22. Absolutely. He is a grown adult. He can drink and vote and die for his country. If he wants to have a sexual affair with you, that is on him. He's the one initiating it. He's the one that contacted you on the website. You didn't contact him. And I talked to Tim, and he was like, you know, you should go out with the guy. He sounds nice. Why don't you go? Go on the date. So I did. And it ended up being a great thing. And I'll make my own little video about Greg and our relationship. We've been together over 2 years now. We're very happy. You know, it's not a traditional relationship in that I'm not looking to marry him. I don't know how I feel about possibly living with him at some point in the future. We're definitely not there now. It's not totally off the table, but I wouldn't say it's something either of us are focused on right now. We spend 1 to 2 days a week with each other. He spends the night. We hang out. We talk every day. But, you know, I mean, it's still a relationship that falls into kind of an odd category. And I do know that at least in his mind, there is a chance that at some point he may decide he wants to have children, which I can't do for him. I'm child-free by choice. I've been sterilized since I was 23. And I know that that's something that we have talked bluntly about, where he's not sure how he's going to feel about that issue in the future, and we're just kind of playing that by ear. But it worked out for us. And I will say that once I was in a relationship with Greg, any sexual interest I had in Tim evaporated. And I realized that I was only going to Tim for sex because I thought I was supposed to, because I thought that my marriage needed sex to be a real marriage. And I mean, I don't disagree with that, but I guess what I'm saying is that I didn't want sex with Tim. I just wanted sex. I wanted romance. I wanted passion. I wanted to feel wanted. I didn't want orgasms. I could give myself orgasms. I wanted to feel desired and beautiful. And Greg did all that for me, where Tim did not. So that's where it stands right now. It's like being married to your gay best friend, right? He's not gay, but he might as well be. We have separate bedrooms now, which is what I said was going to be ironic later on, because once I started dating someone else, I was like, well, if I'm going to have company over, I'm going to need my own bedroom. And that actually worked out great for both of us, because it turned out we both hated sleeping beside each other. He wanted the room too cold. I wanted the room too loud, because I keep the TV on. I wanted more light. He wanted less light. You know, it was just a constant issue. You know, I think the biggest issue with splitting rooms was just deciding who got to sleep with which dogs. Because we're dog parents. It's one of the greatest things we have between each other is a dog family. We have 7 dogs. And so we kind of had to divvy the dogs up. And somehow or other, I ended up with only 2 of the dogs. Don't ask me how that happened. I think part of it's because he has a king-size bed in the master bedroom, which I let him keep because I wasn't going to kick him out of his bedroom. I was the one that suggested the separate bedrooms at that point, so I took the smaller bedroom. And I only had room for a full-size bed. And, you know, when you have 7 dogs and one of them is like a 100-pound dog, you can't fit that many dogs in your bed. So I ended up with 2 and he took the other 5. Which sometimes we switch out depending on what's going on. But we've been doing this for a couple years now, and it's worked well for us. And at this point, neither of us is interested in a divorce. I have made it clear to him that if he wants to go out and date and maybe possibly meet another asexual woman who wants the same kind of thing that he wants, I'm fine with that. He hasn't had an interest. He's actually very happy. He seems to think what we have now is the perfect relationship. He's like, all I ever wanted was a home and a pet family and a person that I could spend time with who wasn't going to pressure me for sex and romance, and I've got that now. So he's totally happy, and this is where there is a little bit of a disconnect, because in his mind, we are still a couple. He still sees us as partners. I do not see us as partners. I see us as roommates who are legally married. Greg does not see Tim and I as partners. He's like, y'all don't sleep together, y'all don't kiss each other, y'all are not a couple. He does not consider us to be in a polyamorous situation. In his mind, this is a monogamous relationship with his girlfriend who is still legally married to her ex. And I tend to see it that way too. Now, I'm okay with him staying there because he's actually tremendously helpful around the farm. You know, if he were to move out, God, I'd have to hire a farmhand. So to some extent, I guess we're using each other, because he certainly can't afford to move out and get his own place, and I can't afford to hire a farmhand, really. So, you know, at least not a full-time one. So it just kind of works out for everybody involved, and I would say that we now have a good friendship with each other. I can't say where it's going to go. I can't say what it's going to be like 2 or 3 or 4 years from now. I am going to retire in 4 years. I'm blessed that I get to retire at a very young age. And I don't know how that's going to shift the landscape, but I think it could. I think there could be things that go on there. But anyway, so that's the story of how I ended up in a platonic partnership with an asexual spouse. And so sometimes in my videos, don't be surprised if you hear me go back and forth between referring to a husband and a boyfriend, because I have both. And it is a very odd situation that a lot of people wouldn't understand. Although I've actually found a surprising amount of support from my friends and family. We are out about all of this. Our coworkers know. my parents know his dad is dead and his mother is estranged, but his friends know. Greg's family knows. Everybody kind of knows what's going on, and there are no secrets. So it has worked well. People have been pretty supportive of it. People have also been very supportive of the age gap with Greg, which also surprised me. Although I shouldn't have, because my mother is significantly older than my dad. And Greg's father is significantly older than his stepmother. So I don't know why I thought it would be an issue. But it wasn't. Like, everyone is totally cool with the fact that we have this big age gap. Which, as a child-free person, I almost feel like it's easier for me to have things in common with a younger person. Because most men my age have children or even grandchildren. And that's not something I can relate to and not something I want to deal with. So that factors in. But for now, it's going well, it's working well, and I am sure I will make some other videos about this. I just wanted to tell the whole story because people always have a lot of questions about it, and it is relevant when I give advice about certain things to understand where I'm coming from in that background. So, I hope you enjoyed story time. If you have any questions, polite ones, I'd be glad to answer them. If you're going to be a dick, I'll just block you. But actually, I won't block you because even when you're a dick, it drives up engagement and it's good for the algorithm. But I won't respond to you at that point. But if you have legitimate questions about how we make this odd relationship work, I'm more than happy to talk about that. Take care of yourselves. Have a great day, guys. Bye for now.